Welcome to Paranormal Crossover. This is the program that discusses what conventional science cannot explain. I'm your host, Lynn Redlinger. In this premiere episode, we'll explore what might have been behind the dramatic leaps in technology of the last 60 years, how community education programs change lives, and the history of the popular series UFOs and the Paranormal. But first, let's welcome back the man behind the scenes, Bob Schultz. Hi, Bob.
Well, thank you, Lynn. It's great to be back.
Now, Bob, we're calling this episode The Return. Can you take a look back to some of those early days here at CTV?
Well, you remember back about 10 years ago when we did our first episode? I think it was December of 2004. And we only had 2 hours to prepare for it, I believe. Yeah. It was a class that we were working in.
And you were filling in.
Yeah, I was filling in, yes. So here's some scenes from that first episode that we did, called Crop Circles and Parallel Universes. And
we were 10 years younger.
Yeah, we were 10 years younger at that time.
Yeah.
But there I am showing crop circle pictures. And here's an interesting crop circle. It's a CD-ROM in ones and zeros, and it has a message. I really can't get into it right now.
Well, Bob, why don't you tell me now, what in your background led you to this? How did you get to crop circles, parallel universes, and the whole realm of the paranormal?
Well, Lynn, we're going to have to go back to when I was born, I guess.
Okay.
I was born in 1938 in Waukegan, Illinois. Here's a picture of me at my one-year-old first Christmas. This is when I was 3 years old. And my dad loved to get me electric trains, and then I learned how to connect the wires up to the trains and so forth, and that's how I started in electricity. Then I went on to high school, and I started working on working in ham radio.
Okay, and so anything else that kind of made you stand out among your classmates there?
Well, I guess so. In my junior year, after I've been in ham radio for a while, I built what we'd call today a cell phone. And this is part of that cell phone. It was really a wagon. And in that wagon, I had a transmitter and a receiver and a car storage battery. And I hauled that wagon behind my bicycle. This is before I got my driver's license.
Okay.
And this is the only thing that's left from that early cell phone was right here. My cell tower was back at my home. And so when I lifted this up and turned the switch here, I could talk to anybody that I dialed up on my phone.
You could call all your friends.
Yeah, call all my friends in town there. My mom said, don't call any long distance calls. You can't afford them.
Okay, so you had the first cell phone in your town there.
Yes.
And they've changed a little bit, but then you went to college. Where was that?
Yeah, I went to college in South Dakota State College in Brookings, South Dakota, and this is a picture of me sitting there at my study desk and the ham radio equipment up on the shelf there.
And I understand that phone that you hauled around in your wagon, now you kind of worked on that a little bit, got it down to a smaller size.
In my junior and senior year, we moved into a house where I could make a bigger setup of my ham radio equipment. And then I miniaturized this cell phone. I put it into a .30 caliber ammo box. I don't have the actual box anymore. That was 60 years ago. So this is what the box was that I built it into, and I had the handset on a little container on the top of that, a little clip on the top of that box. So I could still talk to all my friends when I was a junior or senior.
Still not pocket size, but getting there,
yes,
huh?
Yes.
Okay. Now, then you got your degree, and what was that?
Yeah. I got my degree in electrical engineering. My dad was an electrical engineer. Here I am in the senior class yearbook here. Had a little more hair there.
Yeah. And then where did your first jobs take you to?
My graduating class in electrical engineering consisted of 40 electrical engineers, but I was the only one that got hired into the military division. All 40 of these engineers went to Remington Rand UNIVAC here in the St. Paul area. We all interviewed here and we all got jobs. Great. But I got hired at Plant 5 UNIVAC, which was military division. Everybody else was in the commercial division. So when I came there, I was assigned to work on Navy computers, developing the first Navy computer And this book is called When Computers First Went to Sea. This book is published in 1999, but it's all about our government's early efforts in designing a transistorized computer, the first transistorized computer, because Remington Rand Univac prior to 1960 had built vacuum tube computers. So this is a picture that you see of this transistorized computer. And if you look on the right of this picture, you'll see those boards. They're on that drawer that's sticking out. Each of these drawers came out for maintenance purposes, and then you could get at the printed circuit boards. And here I have one of the original printed circuit boards in my hand here from one of those drawers. And so I helped design that computer. I did the input-output section, designed the input-output section of that computer. My first job was at Univac, but in 3 years I left Univac and I went to work for a small startup company called Data Display Incorporated, which was then taken over by Control Data in 1965. And we were growing so fast that we moved into this building that you see on the screen here. This is built right west of Rosedale. Before Rosedale was ever there, they built this building. Today that building is gone and Chili's is a restaurant in its place.
Okay. And then you did have something to do with NASA?
In my many years designing displays, I would, this is another display that I designed on the screen right here. And these would be used by all the top government agencies in the country, like Lawrence Radiation Labs in Livermore, California, and NASA Houston and NASA Grumman. And so I would get a chance to travel a lot to all these companies because Control Data didn't have a lot of money and you couldn't get loans in those days. So the only way they're going to get money is to ship the equipment. Then they could get paid. Well, the equipment wasn't quite ready, but they shipped me with equipment every time. So then I'd spend 3 months getting the equipment all working properly out at the site. And whenever I got it working, then I could come home.
Oh boy.
So these are different shots of NASA mission controls, and I was working on some of those displays.
Now, when being involved with some of the top defense contractors at the time, you must have seen some real dramatic advances in technology way ahead of what most people knew about.
That's true. And we're going to go a little bit into the future first and show you this book. This book came out in 1999. It's called The Day After Roswell. And if you remember, there was a crash flying saucer in Roswell, New Mexico back in 1947. Well, there was technology recovered from that crash flying saucer. And in this book, Colonel Philip Corso describes that he was in charge of releasing that technology. I'm going to read you just one sentence from this book. My name is Philip Corso, and for 2 incredible years back in 1960 and 61, while I was Lieutenant Colonel in the Army heading up the Foreign Technology Desk at the Army Research Development at Pentagon, I led a double life. Well, he was in charge of releasing things like fiber optics to Corning. This is an example of a fiber optic cable that I actually retained from way back in 1964, I think it was, when I received this roll of fiber optic cable, and I said, well, why am I getting this? I didn't order it. And Corning said, well, we're just sending a roll of fiber optic cable to everybody that's in technical projects, and we're being told that you have to replace your wires with fiber. I said, well, how am I going to use this fiber, you know? The size of this thing. If you look at it on the screen, you can see the little fiber sticking out. It's the size of a human hair. Well, how are you going to plug 2 human hairs together? You know, how can you connect it?
So this didn't exist before?
No. So he's telling me now in 1999 that he was responsible in 61 for funding Corning, and then I received Corning the roll of cable, and I couldn't understand at the time why I'd received this, but then I now understand after reading the book that he had released this technology. And here is an example of a couple of connectors that were developed later, like 5 or 10 years later, that now we can actually plug these fibers together. This is very high tech because the fiber is so small, it has to be very micro precision connectors. So that's an example of something that I know was seeded by Colonel Corso now, that he seeded fiber optics into the industry.
Okay. Bob, with everything you were doing, how would you have time for your family and your hobbies and other interests?
Well, I did have a few other interests. Like I said, I was already into ham radio, but I had a family at home too.
Yeah.
And so I got married in 1961 and had a boy and a girl in 62 and 65. And so you see some of the early pictures in 1966 of our family, 1976, growing up a little bit there. Then I started flying too. So in 1966, I'd always been interested in flying. Ever since my dad took me up in a little Piper Cub, he hired one at the airport when I was in 6th grade. And so I thought, oh, I got to learn how to fly someday. So I got my license in 1966 and flew until 1995 when I retired from flying. That picture was me and a friend of mine in the flying clubs standing in front of our Mooney that we flew to Scotland, single engine aircraft.
Oh my.
Then I was also into music, playing the piano and the French horn. And when I retired in 1990, I got into this whole UFO field.
Okay. Well, when we look at your title, we see the word researcher and we see experiencer. What's an experiencer?
Well, that's something we can't totally get into on this program. We hope to get into it in the future, but I believe that I was an experiencer back in 1965. In 1965, there was a blackout in New York City and all over New York and Maine and all of New England, and even parts of Canada. If you go on Wikipedia, you can read all about it. You just read it yesterday, right?
Yeah.
And so the thing is, there's this article in the Popular Mechanics magazine that we discovered. This is written in 1966. On the left, it says, "Did flying saucers cause the blackout?" Well, if you get into this and you even read it on Wikipedia, it is conjectured that these flying saucers hovered over the power lines, like this picture shows, and drew power out of the power lines and took the whole grid down from 5 p.m. one afternoon in November of 65 to 3 a.m. in the morning. During that time, allegedly, there were hundreds of people abducted and taken aboard those spaceships. And in the future, I might be able to explain that I was one of them.
Topic for another show.
Right.
Okay. Well, then you learned you have kind of a passion for combining talking about the UFOs and the paranormal and teaching about it.
Well, I started aerobics classes when I retired, and one of the teachers I had in aerobics at 6 a.m. in the morning was Ron Sweely, who was a 5th grade teacher at Pike Lake Elementary School. He was also Teacher of the Year one year too. So he got to talking to me about UFOs, and we started to go to breakfast after our aerobics class and before he started teaching every morning. And he discovered I was into UFOs and really wanted me to teach a class to his 5th grade students. I said, "Oh my, Ron, they're not going to allow that, me teaching school on a UFO class?" And he says, "Well, I think so. I'll talk to our principal." So we had a meeting with the principal, and the principal said, "If Ron says it's okay, I'll say it's okay." So we decided, Ron and I, that the first class should be maybe accompanied by a parent. So we decided to hold it in the evening from 6:30 to 7:30, one night a week for 10 weeks. And so this is an article that was written in the New Brighton Bulletin about the results of that class, which I taught 2 years in a row. And so you can see some of the sayings here that what Bob was describing in the class. I incorporated a lot of science along with the UFOs. Then, lo and behold, after that New Brighton Bulletin article, the Minnesota Education Association, MEA Advocate, came out and also described this class I was teaching. That's a journal that's throughout the state of Minnesota. And I thought, wow. And when that article came out, Community Ed contacted me, Mounds View Community Ed. They said, "Well, if you can teach this class to 5th graders, can't you teach it to adults?" And I said, "Well, I guess so. I'll have to make some preparation for it, but okay." So I started an adult ed class, and there's the class bulletin. And in that, back in 1996, it shows that I was teaching various courses on crop circles and spaceship propulsion systems and UFOs and extraterrestrial life.
So you were busy.
I became very busy because the first class I taught, the students said, gee, you can't leave us hanging there, Bob. When you get done with that class, we got to have advanced classes. So those classes, I started having to teach more classes. Pretty soon I was busy every night of the week. And I said, I can't take this after 2 years. There must be a better way. And that's when I discovered in that bulletin, if you look at the bulletin on the screen, you'll see there's other classes there in the bulletin besides my classes. You know, there's some on producing your own TV show and basic TV production workshop. So I decided to enroll in those classes which were taught here at Community TV in Roseville, Minnesota. And that taught me how to run the camera and direct studio classes. And then I started producing a program.
So you realize that one show could go out many times, and
Yep.
just take you that one time to do it, and
So I could expand my audience.
yes.
And so I started this show called UFOs and the Paranormal in 2003, and it's still running today. 11 years it's been running, and so it's really been a fun job.
And I understand you have quite a large audience too for that show.
Well, in fact, CTV did a survey here about 5 years ago, and we discovered that my show is being watched by 2,000 people a week regularly, and another 10,000 occasionally.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
That
great.
has surprised me too.
That's great. Well, you have some other sources that you call upon in making your shows.
Right. Since I don't act in these shows, I'm the producer, okay?
Sure.
So after I took these classes here at CTV and became proficient in producing TV shows, I started directing shows at a conference called the International UFO Conference, which occurs for a week long every year in Laughlin, Nevada. Here's a shot from Laughlin, Nevada. This is near the hotel. They'd put up this 3-story balloon advertising the show, and here's inside of the hotel. So I started directing the video crew, and then also I went to Tucson, Arizona. Some of the crew was from Tucson, Arizona Community TV. This is a shot of them, and they produced a show called The Cutting Edge. And here's the producer and the co-producer of that show, Jim Rogers and Kyle Dayton. So I worked with them, and I showed their shows here in the Twin Cities, and they would show my show down at Tucson. Here I am in the Tucson control studio with Joe Seymour and Kyle Dayton. There's a few other sources that we found too. Recently, the New Paradigm Films, Terje Toftnes in Norway is starting to supply us with some programs too. So that's some of the sources.
Okay, so actually kind of sharing sources, and you're doubling what you can both show then. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now what about MUFON? Okay,
MUFON is a national organization. Here's their journal, and it stands for Mutual UFO Network, and this journal comes out every month, and their main purpose in life is to investigate UFO sightings. They get about 300 sightings a month just here in the United States.
Really?
I joined that group way back 10, 15 years ago and started investigating crop circles. So you'll see some of these crop circle pictures on the monitor here. The first one I investigated was up at Malacca. This is a shot of that crop circle, and you can see a person standing in the middle of these 3 circles. It was in corn. This one is in Blaine. The farmer was harvesting the corn, and he started going around this circle that was all laid down. This did not turn out to be a crop circle formation. It was a flying saucer landing. We have absolute proof that a flying saucer landed right in that patch. It's about 30, 40 feet in diameter. Here's the next shot is in Pease, Minnesota. And this is also in corn, but that was not a landing. That was just, everything in that circle was flattened to the ground, all the corn stalks. The guy down there that is in the picture, he's flying a kite, and that picture was taken from a kite. He put a camera on a kite.
Oh, wow.
Here's in Hamel, Minnesota in 1999, a crop circle formation that you could see from Highway 55 in Hamel as you went by. Here's a close-up of that crop circle. It's the most complicated one that I investigated.
So now, when you go to investigate, you have some things you have to do, collect materials and...
Right. I take samples from inside the circles, the various circles, and also outside as control samples of corn or wheat or whatever it's in. And we, I have to take those samples, many hundreds of samples of stalks, home and hang them in my garage and have them dry before I can send them in the mail to the investigator that actually determines if it's a legitimate crop circle. And he can tell by the way the stalk is, if it's legitimate or not. Because some people actually trample corn stalks down and make the crop circles, but none of these were that way. So Nancy Talbot runs this organization in the United States that does crop circle research. And so I was taking protocol that she had written for collecting all these samples, and she'd tell me on the phone what I had to do and doing all this work, and then she would turn it into a laboratory, and they would turn out an official scientific report on them.
Well, Bob, why don't the Men in Black try to shut down these types of organizations if they want to keep that information secret?
Well, who are the Men in Black? I guess there's a movie out called The Men in Black. You've probably seen it. We think they're men from our government that want to infiltrate some of the UFO organizations and make sure that they don't get the information out to the public. But again, sometimes there's the part of the government that wants it out and other parts of the government that don't want it out. And in the past, we know that they've killed people to keep the information out, that they've infiltrated UFO organizations and disrupted them, and they've gone by the wayside. But I think now we're past that point, and MUFON seems to be operating for, 30 years now, and it looks like we're okay. So I think Men in Black could also be some people in disguise, maybe extraterrestrials too, but we won't get into that on this program. But I think we're going to show a clip coming up here, and before I show that clip, I want to read this little intro to the clip. Author and medical doctor Rauni Luukkonen was the acting Surgeon General of Finland at the time she gave this presentation in the International UFO Congress. So in 1995, at the International UFO Congress in Laughlin, Nevada, she discusses her contact experiences and comments on the new age groups that are getting into this field and are getting the information out. So we're going to listen to this little clip from hers. It's about a minute long.
I know there's a lot of negative disinformation, especially in this country and in some other countries too, done very much so by your government agencies. And I very much oppose that this information is coming to Scandinavia, which it is coming now. I know through a friend who was recruited in Norway that the new age groups like this one are their target for disinformation. And I asked once a man working with NASA, why do you do this? I mean, why do you lie so much to your own people, and why do you do this? The answer was interesting. He said the new age groups are going so fast, they are on the spear of the development, that the fundamentalists who cannot take this, their worldview goes down, there will be too big a gap between people. So you have to stop the new age people for going so fast so that the others would slowly come along, that we would be together. I kind of accepted that concept, but still I think it's very wrong that we are being fed with disinformation about the very, very fear and negativity which is spread around. And I would say roughly, if you want to know who gives disinformation, you can say it's a person who causes fear in you, who says it's terrible. You know, you're being taken over. They're going to take over this country. They're going to take over this globe. Because their message is love and light, and they can't understand why we are deliberately destroying this planet, which is a beautiful planet. Why are we deliberately destroying our own race? Why are we deliberately destroying animals who were given to us for joy?
Well, Bob, we've got just a little bit of time left. Can you give us a preview of what's coming up on your show?
Well, I think we've got a a clip there that we're going to show on the screen that shows that we're going to have future shows on new energy sources, crop circles, the moon and what's happening on the moon, especially on the backside of the moon. Wendell Stevens is a famous UFO researcher that has lots of information. We'll probably do a couple shows on him. And we have to introduce the Urantia book, which you can get in your local library, which is written by 20 ETs, but yet it's in the adult nonfiction section of your library. And we're going to get into regressions and parapsychology and expanding awareness in their future shows. So.
Well, it sounds like you've got quite an interesting season coming up.
Just me, but Tom Woods is the producer of this show, and he has spent a lot of work on this show, and will be spending a lot of work to produce all these additional shows.
Bob, it's been really fun chatting with you today and kind of hearing your background and what has led up to all of this. Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you, Lynn.
And I know we want to thank all the great CTV volunteers and the staff who helped out today. Be sure to tune in to the next edition of Paranormal Crossover.